So here we are at Le Cercle Rive Droite, where we've tasted a couple of wines so far, and we're joined by the wine cellar insider's infamous Jeff Leve, and who just got back from Bordeaux, from En Première, tasting all the 12s out of barrel. And so, I mean, obviously you had a chance to taste them in Bordeaux. You now probably tasted a few things here. Just give us your opinion of the vintage.
Vintage on a whole, it's classic vintage. The wines wouldn't be, it's not fair classified as a bad vintage. It's a classic vintage. Problem with the word classic is, classic means different things to different people. If you're European, classic is sought after. If you're an American, it's a euphemism for on ripe. The problem with the vintage is Cabernet Sauvignon did not get ripe. So in the left bank, many of the wines are going to be green, they're going to be hard, they're going to be dry. But the producers on the left bank that had the money, had the wherewithal, had the ability and stones to actually go out and declassify just an immense amount of their wine, produced nice wines. They're on the left bank in a lighter style, more red fruit than black fruit. They're going to drink well young. On the right bank, it's a slightly different story. Merlot did better. Merlot, especially in Pomerol, was, even though they had drought conditions earlier, they had an uneven flowering, and it was a difficult vintage. Merlot was picked before an onset of, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks worth of rains. So the fruits are fresh. It's not super concentrated. Nobody's going to mistake this for 2009, 2010. And I know people have in some ways compared this vintage to 1998. I think 1998 is a better vintage for the right bank. But in Pomerol, there's some really good wines at all ends of the scale. One wine I'm talking about because it's at this tasting, the Cercle Rive Droite, Clos du Clocher. It's fabulous Merlot wine. Really, really good concentration, good levels of fruit, nice amounts of chocolate, nice amounts of licorice, not pricey. There's some other wines in that category that turned out well. Saint-Emilionn's more mixed. Sandy soils, some of them next to the Pomerol border, made some nice wines. For example, Corban, which you know, pretty good wine. Producers that probably had a real lot of Cabernet Franc are not as successful as the producers in Saint-Emilion with more Merlot in their wines.
Interesting. Now, we talked earlier, you were saying Cheval was great. I mean, did Cheval cut down on the Cabernet Franc that they normally put in their wine?
From memory, I don't think so, but the vinification was really light. So when you're tasting Cheval Blanc this year, there are really lots of red cherries instead of dark fruits. But the difference is the red cherries are really pure, really clean, really kirsch flavors, really supple. But it's a light vintage of Cheval. It's another way to classify this vintage, frankly, is it's a drinker's vintage. You buy these wines to drink, and most of them you're going to drink in bottle the day that they're released. You could take these 2012s tonight home and drink them. It's not a vintage for keeping.
Right. So unlikely we're kind of mixing 10s and 12s at this tasting here. The 10s are wines you don't want to drink. Now, for obvious reasons, big tannins, a lot of acidity. The fruit's there, but maybe a little bit on the close side. And then, wines like Clos du Clocher, a lot of Merlot, really pretty. Obviously not too tannic. Tannins are very soft, well integrated. Maybe, like you said, wines you do want to take home tonight. It's an interesting fact because nobody does better in rough vintages than the Bordelais. These guys, it's like
the producers that have the money in Bordeaux, and frankly, most of them do because I know I have a lot less money in my pocket. They have the money. The guys that can make the selection, they're going to produce wine. They're in even a bad vintage, but 12's not what you'd call a bad vintage. You probably,
I mean, would you compare it to maybe like a 2004 in the right vein?
well, could be. I would probably take a bit of 99, which is drinkable on release. I'd take a bit of 01 because it does improve in the bottle. They're supple textured, they're really nice wines, and they're Merlot based. And then I'd throw in with the Cabernet Sauvignon a little 02 because it's a wetter vintage that didn't fully ripen. I think people will end up liking right bank wines better than what most of the tasters are going to say. The reason is conditions that you asked me about earlier during the tastings were poor. It was cold, it was wet, it was rainy. Those kind of temperatures keep aromatics down, keep flavors down, and keep people's moods down. People that tasted maybe before the premieres or after enjoyed a much better tasting, and I think they'll like those wines. But frankly, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to what they charge.